Pastor Bill will now share the message.
Good morning, everyone. I think the highlight of this morning was seeing Casey dancing up here. Yeah. I didn't realize he can groove. Gosh, that's impressive. Hey, thank you very much, families, for allowing us to have an opportunity to share with your children this week. And it's been our pleasure to serve your family this way. And so thank you very much. And if you don't have a church family to belong to right now, we'd be happy to have you join us here at Haven. Well, this was quite an experience. I didn't get up here because one, I don't have any rhythm. Number two is I just did cleanup, so I feel I can be excused. Okay. This comes from Bullwinkle, for those of you who remember, Mr. Know-It-All. Know-it-alls. You know who they are, right? Know-it-alls. They're the kinds of people who remember that they have absolute knowledge about things. They know so much. They are so brilliant in everything that they do. They are the ones that steal the spotlight from what goes on with their knowledge base without even thinking about who the real experts are. They can be combative. They can be irritating at times. They can be disdainful. You know, the thing is, that's probably true of a lot of know-it-alls. They think they know everything. But the phrase know-it-all is sort of a misnomer, because there are people that are good people that are very brilliant, and they are know-it-alls. There is one know-it-all that actually is genuinely concerned about humanity in a way that's far-reaching than any of us could ever imagine or think. That know-it-all is God Himself. This morning, our message is entitled, The Omniscient Know-It-All, who knows exactly what you need. And it's found in the passage that Darren just shared with us, Matthew 6:25 through 34. God is not a deadbeat dad who just shows up whenever, if and whether he ever wants to. He's not a deadbeat dad who decides when he wants to pay alimony. He's not a deadbeat dad who decides whether or not he's going to pay child support. No. He genuinely is interested in you. Not only is he interested, he knows everything about you. Better than your spouse. Better than your kids. Better than your boss. And even better than the IRS. God knows everything about you. And we're going to study about God's omniscience and His care for His people. Now, omniscience is a big term. It's this big, huge word. It talks about it. When we say that God is omniscient, it's one of His characteristics or His attributes. It's a quality that God has. And what I mean by that, I'm going to just give it to you in two simple phrases. When we say that God is fully, that He's omniscient, it means that He fully knows everything, every aspect about Himself. In other words, He knows everything that's going on in His world, in His life. He not only knows everything about Himself, He knows all things that exist and all things that will happen, even to the minutest detail. Even to the minutest detail. There's a passage in the Psalms, Psalm 139. And it's a very familiar passage that talks about the omniscience of God. I'd like to read for you a few of the verses here. It says in Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6, this. Let me turn there. It says in Psalm 139, starting with verse 1, it says, "O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, Lord. You hem me in, behind and before. You have laid out your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain." God knows everything about us. Well, here's an interesting thought. So, why should we put our trust in an omniscient God when we all worry? When you can worry. You know, worry is sort of our modus operandi. It's the first thing that comes to our thinking, right? A lot of you, trust is not something that's very familiar with us, but worry is. Worry is something that we are so familiar with. Worry is so important that Jesus talks about worry. He mentions the word worry 5 times in this passage that we're going to study. Here's a working definition that we want to use for this. And I'm going to go to that here. What is worry? It comes from this Old English word which means to strangle and to throttle. Here's our working definition. Worry is when a legitimate concern becomes excessive preoccupation. Well, think about that. I thought about it. I pondered this and kind of did a little reading, and I think this is very helpful for us. Sure, all of us worry, but it's when it becomes excessive, when it's just overwhelming. It just puts a lot of weight on us. Worry is when a legitimate concern becomes an excessive preoccupation. When it just, I remember sometimes I'd be so concerned and so consumed about my work and getting stuff done. I'd wake up with heart palpitations. I've had dreams where I'm climbing out of paperwork. You know what I'm talking about? A lot of you know what I'm talking about. You just are struggling. Well, the next couple comments I lifted from somebody, a retired pastor, Ray Pritchard. He observes this about worry. You're probably well into worry, one, when the first thing you are concerned about is the first thing you think about in the morning and the last thing you think about at night. Secondly, when you find yourself thinking about it during every spare moment. Third, when you find yourself bringing it up in every conversation. Think about that. You know what I'm talking about. There have been times where you're just so consumed about something that it's just eating you up. It is strangling you. Literally, it's just strangling you because you're thinking about it so much. So, with that in mind, we're going to dive into our passage. But before we dive into our passage, I want us to take a step back and think about what we're going to learn. Who were the people that Jesus was teaching? Who was his audience when he was doing the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5 to Matthew 7. I did this exercise with a group of you about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's worth repeating again. 9 out of 10 people in first century Galilee were impoverished. Think about that. Okay, we got about roughly 40 people here. Look around. Look around here. There's about 40 of you here. So what's 9%? 36 of you. 36. Okay, 4 of you here. Okay, these 4 right here are well-to-do. The rest of you are poor. You're dirt poor. You might just think about that. All of you are impoverished. That's what's going on here. These first 4 group, that consists of the top 10%. You know, the well-to-do, the people who were in royalty, nobility, military leaders, etc. People who had extreme wealth. The bottom rung are the 90%ers, and these are the 5 through 7. These were people who were stable, near subsistence level. 22% of them, merchants and regular wage earners, artisans, large shopkeepers. That was 22%. The next are the 40%ers, subsistence and often below level, minimum level. People who own small farms, laborers, skilled and unskilled, artisans, wage earners, etc. Tavern owners. And then the 28%ers. Those were the people at the bottom of the rung, well below subsistence, small family farms, unattached widows, orphans, beggars, disabled, unskilled day laborers, and prisoners. Now stop and think of it. These 4 here are well-to-do. The rest of you, you're just grasping for with straws, trying to make ends meet. So keep that in the back of your cranium as we talk about the passage that we're going to study this morning. Now, Darren had shared, he had read verses 25 to 34. I want to give you some context as we get into this passage. Verses 25 to 34 talk about what happens up in verses 19 to 24. That's why that word therefore is there. These are the people who are having struggles with treasures. What kinds of treasures? There were 2 types of treasures, earthly treasures versus heavenly treasures. There are 2 kinds of eyes here. The second set are eyes that were not on God and eyes that are healthy. The next are people who loved money and wealth and materials over their love for God. Let me read that for you. 19 through 24. It says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But," there's a conjunction there, "store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of sight. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body is full of darkness. If then the light is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve 2 masters." 24. "Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." So there's our passage there. So that 20 in 25, it brings us back to 19 through 24. So 19 through 24 have to do with these different issues that are going on. And then it's love for money and love for treasures, earthly treasures. 25 through 34, in a nutshell, have to do with the idea of anxiety, dealing with anxiety because of the world. So let's get into our passage now. Worry about life and food can be salivating. In other words, you just are so consumed with it, you're just drooling. Let's read that here. 25 through verse 27. Let me read that to you. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow, nor do they reap, or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than they? Who, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? So here's what's going on. We notice this in verse 26. It's the idea that God has given us our lives and will provide us everything to keep us going. For us today, what would you say for you meat carnivores? What would be your ideal meal? Well, for me, and for a lot of you, to just say, well, okay, if I have this big full meal and somebody provided, paid for it, I'd say, well, let's see, let's start with a Caesar salad. I've rehearsed this because I've thought about it a lot of times. I have, no kidding. I mean, even when I give blood, the people say, is there anything that you need? And so whenever I give blood at Red Cross, I always tell them the same thing. Caesar salad, shrimp cocktail, 12-ounce ribeye, boneless, with caramelized onions and mushrooms, piece of broccoli, of course, a baked potato, and then a creme brulee and a mug of coffee. I need to slug it down. Okay, so what do you think the people there what do you think these people had, the most common people? What they had was some flat bread that was baked. They had to roll out and make their own bread. Some olives, olive oil, maybe some lentils or beans, and if they're fortunate enough, a piece of broiled fish. Think about what you will have this coming lunch in a couple, in another hour or so. What they had was barely scratching the surface for the most part. You think about it, they were scratching and clawing for their basic needs, and still they also had to deal with the weather, inclement weathers oftentimes, the dry, arid heat, potentials of flood, poor living conditions. The health was horrible. Darren, we went on this missions trip. We think that Mexico or Baja was really bad. First century Galilee was awful. People were dying of all sorts of different things. So there was lots of stress. The basic important things, they are important, but Jesus is telling his audience here in this passage that excessive worry and anxiety are pointless. There's more to life than food and clothing. And so he uses this rhetorical question in this verse. He asks this question, and he doesn't expect a good answer from them, because you know what? The poor knew that there was something more important than just food and shelter. Verse 26.